Welcome to another episode of The Crow's Nest. I'm your host, Christopher Corvo, and on today's episode, myself and the legend Bobby A will be discussing True Detective Season 1. Yes, there's going to be some spoilers. Honestly, tough cookie. If you haven't watched this show yet, then shame on you. Because this television show is one of the best shows I've ever seen. Honestly, even to this day, it's one of the finest television shows I've ever seen, and it's so many different levels. It is a visual experience. It shows you what storytelling can be and has been from time to time. So on today's episode, myself and Bobby A, we're going to be discussing and trying to delve into some of the nuances of this show. This is a show that him and I have discussed many times, and we continually bring up themes and scenes and bits of dialogue from it years and years later. So get ready to see True Detective Season 1 from our eyes. The only eyes that matter in this particular moment. So get ready, because here comes the next conversation. Thank you, Robert Avery, the legend, Bobby A, for tuning into this episode and being with me as we talk about something that is near and dear to both of our hearts. Season 1 of True Detective, possibly the best show ever on television.
Top 10 for sure.
Yeah, and honestly, the best person to be discussing this, to be reviewing this beautiful piece of, cinematic pleasure is Robert Avery, because honestly, this man has delved into this show more deeply than anyone I really know, and I think he should in the future, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps teach a class. I could see this man, Professor Robert Avery at NYU, teaching this elective.
Hell yeah.
It's the philosophy of True Detective Season 1. So I forget, when did this season even come out? It's been a while.
It has. January 2014. So about 6.5 years ago now.
Damn. And it's crazy because I can still see sequences in my mind.
Yeah, that's because it probably had a profound effect on you, like it did a lot of people, and television in general.
How many times have you watched this show? I know it, but I want to hear. I want the audience to know just how much you've invested in this television show.
I have seen the entire series straight through 3 times, but I've seen select episodes more times. So we're talking about, I would say, a handful there, like 5 to 6 times for certain specific episodes. There's only 8, so meaning maybe half of those, I don't know. But I've watched many episodes numerous times, so probably about half of them.
That's crazy. I mean, that's honestly crazy, and that's like
I gotta study, man.
Correct. That's what I was gonna say. You stole the word right from my mouth. Robert Avery doesn't just consume this show; he studied it. Like he delved into the nuance. And if I recall, if I can go back in my mind 6 years, I believe you even were writing like essays and were sending out essays and emails about this show. Was I right? Like, didn't you start to delve into it and start to tie like different plot points together, and you're definitely, your brain was spinning, if I recall.
That's 100% correct. I did the same with some of the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones, as you also remember. I believe you enjoyed my take. That was a long one, though. That was more of a tome than just than like a perspective. But yes, I did, and I do. I guess we'll touch about more of this at the end. But one of my favorite parts was how it affected me in that way, and how it would be a Wednesday night, and I'm sitting in bed trying to fall asleep, and I'm thinking about, what is Russ going to do in the next episode? It's like, that's the effect that it had on me. It's really cool.
That's crazy. So as we delve into this season of television today, now, and we give kind of our review, and for those listening, there might be some spoiler alerts. Hey, the show came out in 2014, 6.5 years ago. I'm sorry. Spoiler alert, it's happening. Get used to it. But where do you think we should start this review? What aspect of the show do you want to focus on first?
Yeah, that's right. Before we get that, Chris, you're exactly right. If you haven't seen it yet, go take a hike. Go fuck yourself. If you call yourself an avid viewer of television and you appreciate the art form and you're into dramatic television and you haven't seen True Detective yet, come on, come on, just get out of my face. But let's start with um, let's start.
That's a sound you hear when Robert Avery kicks you out into the stratosphere out of just pure disdain.
That's right. That's right. I'm sorry. I turned my phone. That's Link swinging his master sword for anyone that got that one.
Oh,
But so let's start with the beginning. Let's start with the introduction. So the first thing we ever see with True Detective is the title sequence, and what a title sequence it was, because it was so groundbreaking in terms of how it impacted other title sequences that followed in television, specifically with HBO. So, as you remember, Chris, I believe we talked about this on the first episode. We kind of touched on it, where we have that like alternative country folk song by the Hanson family called "Far From Any Road," and you'll see that theme um, throughout, not just the acting, but the characters and just the plot points as well. So those words are very ingrained in True Detective. So it's a very good choice by um, the showrunners and Nic Pizzolatto, who we'll talk about in a little bit, the writer, where they chose like this. It's like an eerie. The lyrics are they're a little out there. They're a little. You got to listen to the song a lot to get the image. They're very descriptive, and the imagery involved in it. It's very in line with what you're going to see in True Detective. So that's very well done. So it's also a catchy tune as well. It's like a little mellow. It has that like kind of tinge of eeriness, which is cool. And on top of that, so you got the song, the guitar hits immediately, and then you have the artwork, which is something I had never seen really on television, where you have the characters' faces drawn on the screen, but embossed on their faces are several scenes from the show, and that's where you pick up kind of the Easter eggs. So there's one stuck out to me where I was watching a scene where one of the this pastor that his church is ended up being involved with this with the abduction and torturing and killing of the children, which we'll also get into in a little bit. But he closes these giant double doors, these like really expensive looking double doors at this brand new church, and it makes a T. So once the door closes, the light makes the vertical part of the T, and there's a part of the door that makes the horizontal part of the T, and that T is the T you see right before the words True Detective pop up on your screen. So it's very well done. It's extremely detailed and extremely well thought out. And just right off the bat, whoa, like this is I'm getting into something right now. So, what do you think about like just the way artistically it's done and the way the choice of music? It puts you in the right mood.
yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, we've discussed this. I think we discussed this in an earlier episode, but right, the way the way HBO chose to create the intro, it was like, now if you were to watch it, for those listening who haven't, and you go and watch it now, you'll say, "Oh, I've seen this style before," but really, like this, the way they did their opening sequence was very unique. Like I had never seen it before. It's become kind of a normal pattern nowadays, but at the time, it was like, whoa, interesting music, very deep, kind of dark. It definitely kind of got you instantly in the mood, because I really think it captured the tone of the show. And with the visuals, it was just a very interesting feeling. Like it was able to elicit like a really like an emotional feeling, and it just had a quality about it. And you see the different actors that are in it. You see sequences, and it was really cool because you also see the grid. Like you see this you see the geographical location kind of embossed um, over these different scenes of where the show is taking
Right.
place. The
Yeah.
actual environment, you see the roadways and whatnot, and yeah, it just was it puts you right in the zone, and like you said, which is perfect. It's like you're gonna get into something. You know what I mean? Like when a show, like if when the tone is set that early, oh, okay, I'm gonna be in for a ride. Like there's something gonna happen here. And I thought, yeah, I mean, 10 out of 10 for just the title sequence, the intro theme was really cool. Was perfect.
From the dusty mesa, a gloomy shadow grows, hidden in the branches of the poison creosote. You remember that? You
Yeah,
remember
right.
that?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And what's crazy is if you heard that, like if you were at a bar and somehow that was on the jukebox that came on, your mind's instantly going to True Detective. Like no matter what, I'm gonna be
Absolutely.
like,
Yeah,
oh shit, like something about to happen. Russ Cole is gonna be entering the bar.
that's right. And the thing that I also want to mention about that is that song wasn't created for True Detective. So a lot of the HBO shows like Westworld, Night of, Game of Thrones, the opening title sequence music is composed by someone specifically for that show. This song was picked out. You could There's hundreds of millions, there's probably billions of songs available in the world. And there's not probably, there are billions of songs available in the world. And they chose this one specifically, so like you just said, Chris, there's a reason. You're about to get into something. The lyrics of the song are going to be important. And the song came out in the late 90s, early 2000s. So even at the time that True Detective was released or aired, excuse me, that song was already over a decade old. So they specifically picked that song for a reason. It's cool. Like you said, that if the song puts me sitting at a bar at like a rural dive bar in Louisiana, and I have a glass of whiskey in my hand, and there's only like three other people in the bar, and we're all just staring at our glasses, listening to music over as like the sun's setting into the swamp of Louisiana. That's what it is. That's how the song makes me feel and puts me in that environment. So it's really well done.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's like there is that quality in it. So with this show, I think we should tackle it from a couple different angles, and we've covered kind of this title sequence, but I think the production, you and I have discussed this before, right? The production quality of this show before we even delve into like the themes or the actors or the writers, but the production had its own quality to it, and I know you and I have there's certain elements of the production that both stuck out to us. So what what about the production, the actual cinematography, the visual effect of the show was so appealing? Because it does have an aesthetic, a quality to it visually that kind of sets it apart and gives it a tone. Is that the right word? Tone? There's
Yeah,
quality.
you're right. I like the latter word better. So what I would say to that is what I found fascinating was it was one of the first shows that had those long range distance 20-mile long shots, aerial shots, sometimes aerial but sometimes from behind, and where it's totally pitch black and the only thing you see is the headlights of Rust's and Marty's car. All you see is headlights on a really pitch black dark road surrounded by just nature and swamp. And they're driving down one single road, and the camera will just pan out, and you can just see it's just nothingness but this one road, and they're the only car in it. And it's cool because it was scored, the music that was scored underneath it was like this booming like like that type of music. So you felt it. If you had a good sound system, you actually felt the what was the scene that was happening. It did. You weren't just watching True Detective. You were experiencing it. You were feeling it. Because I remember, when I was sitting on the couch, I was just gripped. I was like, I felt it, like the trembling, and it makes you feel like you're on a roller coaster. You're on. a ride. And I think that's what they're going for with those loud booming scores of just those long distance shots of the car. And a lot of times, in the beginning where they find Dora Lang tied to the tree, and they show her tied to the tree, but then they pan out, and all you see is nothing but field and grass, and then you see Marty and Rust and a couple other of detectives in the crime scene, but it's just this one tree in the middle of complete nothingness. It's just rural Louisiana. There's nothing but fields and grass for miles, except that one tree where she was tied to. So like these big long distance panning, like almost panoramic type shots were one of my first things that I really liked about it.
So do
And
you?
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. No,
No,
go,
no,
go,
no.
go.
I was going to jump into the that 6 minute single tracking shot. But
Oh
you go
yeah.
first. We'll talk about
No,
that.
no. I was gonna say, like, along with this, because now you're bringing up Louisiana, and Louisiana was such an integral part of the. It's almost a character, because you're right. Like, where else would you have, and they picked the perfect place to to focus a story because of the landscape, right? Because as Rob's saying, a lot of these sequences are these kind of very lonesome, desolate kind of places, um, not picturesque, but in many cases barren. And there's a feel that kind of comes about that almost is like extracted from Louisiana itself, as if Louisiana is one of the characters in this story. Like the show, and as we delve into the plot, wouldn't have fit if it took place in, I don't know, New Jersey or Connecticut. Something about Louisiana, New Orleans. It brought, you can't, with TV you can't smell, but you can see this environment, and you can almost smell it. You're like, there's a quality here. There's a in many sequences, almost a darkness, a heaviness that comes about from the shots, and also the geographical location they chose. Um, I've never been to Louisiana. Have you been to New Orleans and Louisiana?
I have several times. It's a wonderful town. But you're right. It the setting of the state of Louisiana in the late '90s and later, 'cause as we said, we're going to give things away. There's two timelines, so the settings that they give are the '90s and like the mid 2000s in Louisiana, and they nail both of those in terms of feel and aesthetic, just the way it looked. But in terms of, from my experience in Louisiana, I went down to New Orleans because I was visiting one of my good buddies that went to Louisiana State University, which coincidentally, but actually not coincidentally, maybe more universally, uh, Nic Pizzolatto, the creator of the show, also attended Louisiana State University, LSU for short. They are located in Baton Rouge, so it's like an hour north, I would say. I could be wrong on the timing, but it's about an hour drive north of uh, New Orleans. And I attended a Louisiana State football game there. And I'll tell you this right now, Chris, no one does sporting tailgating like the SEC, like the Southeastern Conference in football. I'm talking, not that we're going to see this anytime soon with this goddamn pandemic, but there were about 120 people in a stadium, in one stadium alone. And prior to that, there's about 80,000 people starting at 7 a.m. We're talking about cooking food, grilling, playing games, chopping it up, having a good time, catching up. There's families, there's people playing drinking games. I had the best piece of pulled pork that I ever had at an LSU tailgate. I also ate alligator, which you would be proud of me of. I went off the grid a little bit. I ate some barbecue alligator at the tailgate. It was delicious.
Tastes like chicken.
Yeah, it did. It did. Oh, I was a little inebriated too, so that would help. But it
Probably
did.
went down smooth, I'd imagine.
It was tasty, and so those were the reasons I was there. But before the game, so the games are all Saturday afternoon. So I would come in on like a Thursday, and we would spend the first couple days in New Orleans, and that's where I went to Bourbon Street, the French Quarter. So I'm doing all the hits. But so that's where the great thing about Louisiana is everyone's having a good time, everyone's in a good mood, great music, definitely great food, good cuisine, and that's because of the cross cultural nature of Louisiana. And to tie it back to True Detective, you kind of see that you have like the Caribbean influence with the Creole, with the European French influence, with the American influence, and this is all wrapped into one place, and that's where you get the allure, the folklore, and the mystique, and a lot of that is where you get like the dark arts and the voodoo and the witchcraft and what is like the Santeria, like that part of it. You definitely get that feel when you walk in the streets. New Orleans is also very, very old. The city of New Orleans is almost 300 years old. It's really has a lot of history. So then, to tie that up, I went when I was in New Orleans. I went a little west of it to hang out toward like the area where Tulsa University is. So that's a little bit outside of New Orleans to the west, more toward not toward I would say not near Lake Charles, but going that direction. And Lake Charles is one of the bigger rural cities in New Orleans and excuse me, in Louisiana, and that's where you see kind of the swampy, the True Detective, the big long fields, because it's right on the Gulf of Mexico and it's really flat. There's not a lot of tall trees in New Orleans. You could see if you're standing in the street, you could see for miles, especially if you're standing in like a suburban rural area. You can see for a really long time because or excuse me, you can't see time. I'm an idiot. You really long distance, and it's really cool because like we've both lived in New York for a while. I've been
Yeah.
to Los Angeles, Miami, Canada. You don't get to see that far because everything is low cut, but there's nothing but grass and fields and swamp and lakes and rivers. It's so that would be my summary of Louisiana, but you definitely get that feel, that darkness, the heaviness, as you said.
Yeah, I like how you said the dark arts because
Yeah.
as we get into the plot, like there is that quality of a of a darkness, and you said it's right. I've never been in New Orleans. I've never been to Louisiana. I know people from those parts, and I've read about them, but because there is this melting pot of cultures there, and as these people were brought there or moved there, because you have the Creole, the French, you have the African, you have these melting pot of ideas and beliefs, and like you said, you get the voodoo, you get the Santorini, you get these um, supernatural belief systems that I think are prevalent, or more so prevalent there than they might be in other places, because that place is so old. I didn't realize it had been around as a like New Orleans for 300 years. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like 18th century, I think. Go ahead. I'll
No, but
get you the correct date.
no, that's so crazy. And as Robert, alluded, the creator of this show, and it's kind of hard to not focus on him, and I give him a lot of praise. The creator, Nic Pizzolatto, is that he's from this place, and this type of story, you had to have had an intimacy with that place, I think, to in order to have written this story. And the writer grew up there. He knew the people, he knew the patois, how they spoke, the belief system, the culture of Louisiana, of New Orleans, and of all this surrounding area. And um, I don't know if you know this, Rob, but I've read about the writer writing this. Like he taught fiction writing at a college. I think it might have even have been in a school in Louisiana. And at some point when he was trying to segue into television, this show that came about, it almost was a stream of consciousness. If I recall, um, maybe not the whole season, but let's say the first 4 or 5 episodes, he wrote over the course of a few days, like a stream of consciousness, like nonstop, like he was possessed by the muse and just gave birth to to these shows, and anyone who knows script writing, right? Like that might not seem a daunting task, but just for a moment realize that for every minute of television or of a film, that's usually equates to 1 page in a script. And as Rob said in the beginning, this was about 8 episodes at a roughly, let's say 50 plus minutes of television. And this man wrote every episode. So that's 50 pages times 8. And that's kind of unheard of. And most shows, the showrunner, there's a team of people. There's a team of writers. Even shows like Breaking Bad. Vincent Gilligan, he didn't write every episode. He might have overseen and helped shape the story, but there's a team of people because that's a daunting freaking task. And this man wrote every episode. And the quality of the writing, the denseness, the dialogue, how deep and profound it is, it's like, holy crap. How did you write that? Because this is not like a topical buddy cop drama. This is like deep. This is philosophical. It really makes you, scratch the old noodle and think about, consciousness. Think about your very existence. Yep. And I know you're a fan of the written word. So what do you have to say about just the writing itself?
That's incredibly interesting. I did not know that about Nic. That's very, very impressive. But most people think that it's easy. Oh, he sat down and over a matter of days, if he just dedicated himself, he could finish that. I could do that. No, you can't. You know how hard it is to write, to just start writing, first of all, and to write that. I think quick math guy, I think that was 400 pages. So he wrote 400 pages in days of television, which is of teleplay, which is incredible, which is just, that's mind blowing. That's an astonishing number. Very impressive. I didn't know that, but I think the written word has kind of taken a backseat these days to audio and visual. And it's a shame because the written word is becoming a lost art. People don't have time for it anymore. They don't like reading. If it's not a TikTok video they can see in 15 seconds, they don't care anymore. And if it's not, it can't fit in a 140 character Twitter tweet. They don't want to have any part of it. All right. There's not to say that books are unpopular now. There's still people that are very profound writers and it's a good career and it's still well respected. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the general public is moving away from the written word and going to digital, like reading on a tablet or an iPad, or they're just not reading at all and all they want to do is watch television, movies, and listen to podcasts and listen to music. I'm not shitting on podcasts because we have one, but my overall point is that it's kind of a lost art, and it's a shame because as a person that's a fan of the written word, it's kind of going by the wayside, and I hope we don't lose it. But what I'm trying to say is the era that I want to live in is a place where the most revered public personalities aren't social media influencers, aren't filmmakers, aren't actors, aren't athletes. That's what we have in 2020. Those are the public, the famed, the public celebrities, right? Those type of people, politicians. I want to go back to the time where it was the inventors, the writers, and the artists, the painters, the Da Vinci's, the Hemingways. That's the time I want to go back. And like Nietzsche and like all the classical writers. I want to go back to the time where the writer was revered as an athlete is revered today.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that, and I think it's interesting because you said like nowadays we consume so much of our media via audio and visual. Of a lot of people, mainly visual, and I think what's interesting with that is that people forget if you're watching a drama or you're watching a comedy or whatever, everything you see, both the dialogue and just the stage directions, the movement, the scene, the setting, all of that was written. It was written first. Then it was made real, right? Then actors were brought in, then dialogue
exactly.
is given. But everything you see is written. It came out of someone's imagination. They took pen to paper or they clicked on some keyboards and they had to conceive, oh, that actor does a dance here. Well, there's a good chance if you read that script, that was in the script. And I just think for myself, like who has attempted to write scripts, not successfully, it does make you appreciate and value when someone does it so well, like in this case, where you're like, that must have been so hard. How did you do that? How did you conceptualize that? Not just the dialogue, but the movement, the sequences, the whole. It's like you're building a house, like you are doing an architect, but you're building something in your mind, and that to me is just it's astounding because it has to be so difficult.
Yep, yep. And just as you said, people forget that. People forget that when they watch movies that they like, that's not drawn. There's a way it is eventually when it's storyboarded, but it starts with the written word. It starts with letters and words and sentences and paragraphs and pages that become scripts. That's the foundation. That's the skeleton. That's how it starts. That's the genesis of almost all the entertainment you see. And it pains me when I send emails or I'll send like a writing packet or the text message is too long. Oh, there's even some stupid like fucking internet um, acronym for it. TLDR. It stands for too long, didn't read. If there's too much text, if there's too many words, people don't want to. They don't fuck with it. They want tweets. They want Instagram stories. They want Facebook posts. They don't want. They even make fun of you if I write emails. I take pride in emails. I take pride in the words. I choose them deliberately and express them in a way. For someone to tell me to open it and be like, this is too long, I don't want to read it. Well, that's not a problem with me. I think that's a problem with you. You got to look at yourself.
Damn. You taught me something. I didn't realize that that's what TDLR meant. Right? That's what it
TLDR, TLDR.
TLDR.
Too long, didn't read.
Well, with this show, I have a question. So there's one scene in this show that is a 6+ minute one take scene, and I'm curious. Do you think that was written, or do you think that was a directorial choice?
Obviously we don't have the inside knowledge, and nor do we pretend to be experts
No, of course not.
in like television production. But in my view, I think it has to be a little of both. You have to have some kind of written outline. But I think the director, his name is Kara Fukunaga. I believe I pronounced that correctly. Yeah, he's really good. He's also gone on to done a lot of other really good work after True Detective. He was definitely involved, along with Nic Pizzolatto as well. They probably worked together because the director needs to make sure the extras are doing the right things, people are in the right places, people are moving when they're supposed to. You probably have a shit ton of assistant directors all over that compound where they shot that 6 minute tracking shot. But it did start with a written outline. It probably was born in the brain of Nic Pizzolatto, but Kara executed it. So they probably were working hand in hand, along with other production assistants and assistant directors. Because if one person runs the wrong way and runs through the camera the wrong way or runs into the camera as it's moving, because that camera is moving everywhere, you got to shoot the whole thing all over again. It has to be done all over again. And how many takes do you think it took them to nail that?
I have no idea. I mean, so the scene we're talking about, for anyone who hasn't seen the show, is there is a high action scene, right? It's like a kind of a drug bust, and you got
It,
people scattered. What were you
Wait,
gonna
yeah,
say?
hold on. I'm gonna add to that. It's a scene where so Russ Cole, Matthew McConaughey, is forced to go undercover to prove he's not a cop. So he's forced by these bike gang members to rob other drug dealers to prove that he's not a cop. And he's heavily undercover, and they're close to um, a major breakthrough in the case. So McConaughey is thinking to himself, he's like, "Fuck, I don't want to do this. This is going to be wildly dangerous." But he has to do it. If they want to solve this case, this is the moment. So he does a bunch. They give him a bunch of heroin to snort. He's snorting cocaine. He's snorting heroin. He's drinking. He's smoking weed. They get him all fucked up, and then they say, give him a shotgun, and they go, we're gonna rob these other drug dealers. So he does it, and it's him and this bike gang trying to rob other drug dealers in like this gated community, which is a widely dangerous neighborhood of Louisiana. It's notorious. It's well known. So then they get in there, and all hell breaks loose. The mission goes haywire because I forgot why someone shoots someone when they're not supposed to, so then everybody starts shooting from all around the house, and then it just turns into a giant gunfight. But Russ needs to capture the leader of the bike gang because he's the lead, so he has to. He can't die, so he saves this guy's life, and he drags him out. So go ahead. That's pretty much I think I nailed that actually.
Dude, I think it's like that's pretty freaking spot on. Yeah. Well, and one detail, right? Aren't they acting as if they're wearing cop clothes? They're trying to act as if they're police, correct?
That's correct. But then when you look at them, they all have long hair, giant beards, tattoos on their face. They're clearly not cops. Yeah.
And in the sequence, right, it's a melee. There's just so much stuff going on when it finally erupts, and that's this long 6-minute scene. And you're 100% right. Like that camera, because if you have any like just a minute production experience, and you watch something, you can kind of like put yourself in the mindset where you're like, okay, like I'm seeing this, but like there's a camera that's outside of my frame of reference. So, oh, it's moving, right? And there's someone carrying this camera, and all of this activity is going on. There's a moment where Russ Kroll has to climb a fence, and it's like the camera is just following him perfectly. So the choreography, how they had to choreograph all of the actors' movements, and the extras' movements, but also the camera movements is it's a thing of beauty. I can't imagine how many the takes they did. Probably many. I just there's just so many moving parts. There's no way you're gonna get that one. That's not a one take. You're done. That's like, all right, we're gonna spend 3 days trying to get this 6 minutes of footage. And I think we can't go really any further without now talking about just the actors, because in this case you have two of the guys, two of the goats, the OG actors that make this show, that really take the written word and breathe life into it and make, I think, this show what it is. So I got to kick that to Robert Avery, because this is his dude. This is his man crush, if you will. Why don't you take it away?
He's my personal sage, my life coach. He's my if I had to follow the religion, he would be my deity. And I can't believe we've gone this far without me pumping Matthew McConaughey's tires. That has to be a record. We're around like 30 minutes by now. Jesus, Murphy. But so
I've never heard the expression "pumping someone's tires" until you've said it. I have to use that now. I gotta file that one away.
Yes, absolutely. It's yours. It's for the people. It's communal. So we have
for the people.
Yeah, and so we have Matthew McConaughey, obviously, but then we have equally as good, no slouch by any means, Woody Harrelson, one of my favorite actors too. Great actor. He's Woody. He's from Cheers,
Yep.
and he also in a ton of my favorite movies, Kingpin, the People versus Larry Flint. I mean, if we're naming Woody Harrelson movies, we'll be here all night.
Natural Born Killer, awesome movie,
dude, ridiculously good. So those two guys, and as I think you said it in the beginning a little bit, it's far from any traditional buddy cop show. And notice how I said "far from," which is the title of the theme song. Far. Fun. You see what we did there? We connect all the dots, and so it's not anywhere near, because both of them are highly flawed and have tons of personal demons. It's not your hard-nosed cop with the goofball comedy cop. Nope, they're both seriously flawed. They have demons that they're still battling, and it also parallels the case that they're investigating, which is another genius part of it. The personal lives of both Marty Hart, who's Woody Harris, played by Woody Harrelson, and Russ Cole, played by Matthew McConaughey, their internal strife also mirrors the the complexities and the danger and almost literally the demons that are involved with the case itself. So for Matthew McConaughey, I don't know about you, Chris, but I wasn't a McConaughey guy before this. Because to me, McConaughey was more of the surfer dude, rom com, hunky, um, from the 90s and early 2000s. Basically, the guy that invites you into his Airstream to have a couple margaritas and smoke a joint. That's what I thought Matthew McConaughey was. But what was your take on McConaughey before True Detective?
I had seen Matthew McConaughey in some stuff, and I wasn't like I liked him. He had done some serious movies. It's just that for a while he got kind of lost in romantic comedy world because he did Amistad. He was in A Time to Kill. He was in a movie with Bill Paxton. He had done some stuff. So at least I was like, I'd seen these movies, and some were a little random, and I was like, oh, I like this guy. I know he's capable of something, but you're right. For a lot of people, their love affair with Matthew McConaughey really started with True Detective because this is the beginning of his McConaissance. This is the he where he began to
Yes,
reinvent himself.
that's
And
right. That's right.
yeah, and I have to admit, anyone who's listening, I have more memes in my phone that are focused on Matthew McConaughey than anyone else, and they all come from Robert Avery. For someone who wasn't a fan, this show really transformed um, Rob's this liking of him. He
Yeah.
became a bona fide true thespian from from doing the show,
Yeah.
and that's high praise from Rob.
He almost instantly vaulted into being my favorite actor, which is, like you said, it's wild. And um, I just can't say enough about this performance. We'll get into the actual themes of what he was saying, but just in terms of perception, you're right. It changed who I thought he was. And shame on me because you're right. He did do A Time to Kill. That's a great movie. Uh, and even going back and watching it now, where he's what's that little thing he's chewing on in A Time to Kill the entire time, like the little mini cigar. That movie's
Yeah.
awesome. And then Sam Jackson gives the line, "Yes, you deserve to die. I hope they burn
Hope
it." So yeah, that's A Time to Kill for
yeah.
anyone who thinks that's just from Chappelle Show. That's from
And I hope he burns in hell.
yeah, that's from A Time to Kill. Great movie.
Yeah.
So in terms of Harrelson, I think they also play off each other good because they're friends. They're
Yeah, they
actually
know each
best
other.
friends. Yeah. They're both from South Texas. That's why, and so they know they grew up kind of in the same type of household, same neighborhoods, and so they are very very close. So you could see that immediately transcends to the screen. You're telling yourself these guys are have chemistry. It's not forced.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. They're extremely comfortable with each other because if you think about it, with these two characters, and now we might as well just get into the plot. There's no way I mean, not saying there's no way, but knowing each other and being comfortable with each other is going to help you with this particular material because you're comfortable that you're not going to cross any lines. Like you have a safe place to work with each other because the material, the plot of the story is not light at all. It is heavy, 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 heavy. It gets under your skin. It's dark. And why don't you have a knack for kind of laying out plots. So why don't you kind of just break out what is this show or what is this season about?
Yeah, that's good. Finally, we'll tell you actually what it's about. We've been waxing poetic a little bit here about all but it's good. It's necessary. You need to set the table first. So here's the dinner, and it's basically we got McConaughey, and so we got. I'm gonna call them their characters' names because you should know them by now. Uh, we have Russ Cole and we have Marty Hart. They've been assigned a case where there's been this widespread disappearance of sex workers in rural Louisiana between the ages of about 12 and 16. So children, early teenagers, and sometimes outright children. And they've been disappearing, and they've been tortured and murdered and then displayed almost in a ritualistic, sacrificial way with symbolism. They're all tied together. Their eyes are covered with blindfolds. They're wearing deer antlers. There's like ornaments surrounding them. So it's definitely ritualistic in a very dark, disturbing way. But the organization, which we'll see, is called it's excuse me, it's not the organization is not called the leader. The villain is the Yellow King, and he's created an organization where um, it's not just criminals and drug dealers that are involved. We have the church is involved. We have the authorities, the politicians, the police department. So Rust calls it the sprawl. It's just affecting all of Louisiana, just the entire state. Almost every department and administrative agency in the state is involved in this just very disturbing and upsetting child molestation, raping, and murdering ring. And very heavy topic because we're talking about it's very, very young children and early teenagers. So it's rough, and they show almost a lot of it. So prepare yourself for that because you'll see a lot of things that may upset you. It definitely will disturb you.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
so they're investigating this. They're trying to find who's behind this and stop them. And along the way, that's where you'll see Rust has a lot of personal demons where he had a young daughter who died in an accident, and that torpedoed his entire marriage. It drove him to the bottle. He became an alcoholic. He cleaned up, but then he relapsed. So he's dealing with his addiction and his disease and the loss of his daughter and his family. And then simultaneously, Marty Hart is dealing with his infidelity. He cannot stop cheating on his wife, who's played by Michelle Monaghan, who also does an incredible job. She's wonderful in this as well. The way I would say it is he's rotten with infidelity. Just cannot stop himself. And he has it's not even sometimes it's a full-fledged affair where it's prolonged, and sometimes it's a one-time thing. This man just cannot stay faithful,
Yeah.
and he has a whole family. He has two daughters. Uh, he has a wife who's a beautiful, loving family, and he just cannot. And he actually remember the scene where he gets pissed off at Rust. Rust shows up at his house once and mows his lawn, and for someone that's consistently cheating on his wife, he gets so mad at even the thought that Rust was there without him because he could potentially be sleeping with his wife. He's just so hypocritical. So that's Marty's demons. He can't keep his dick in his pants. He cannot. And Rust is dealing with like more of pain and suffering.
Yeah, I mean it is an interesting dynamic because it's like Woody Harrelson's characters. He's the good old boy. He is, was I think if I recall, he was the football player who married the beautiful cheerleader type of scenario, right? But now he's aging, and he's trying to kind of hold on to his glory days through this rampant infidelity. And then you're right. Russ Cole is this person who's having literally an existential crisis.
Yes.
And that to me is where he's such an interesting character because he says the things that are he says the things that most people keep to themselves and keep in their head. And it's beautiful. It's like what he's thinking, he just expresses, and it's just this deeply philosophical, existential, almost nihilistic, like narrative that's just going
Yeah,
and
definitely.
going and going.
Yeah, and it's a good, like you said, it's a good balance. They kind of check each other because many of the scenes are just them driving in a car. It sounds boring, but it's definitely not. It's the best scenes are where Marty and Rust are riding in a car. There's many of them, and they're just talking to each other, and you see their philosophies come out. Marty is more of the carefree, I take them as they come, I keep it even type guy.
Yep.
Rust is, man, we all should just kill ourselves. So, and it's because he's been burned in the past by the universe, and so for him, existence means one thing, whereas for Marty, existence means an entirely different thing.
Yeah, there's a great kind of, because the story starts out, these guys have not been together that long, right? It's kind of a new partnership, and I think they display it well, right? You're police officers, anyone who's listening who's a cop, right? If you're given a partner, it's a new relationship, and it's also one where potentially you might have to risk your own life to protect each other. So it's kind of funny because it starts out where Russ is very quiet, and that is off-putting to Woody Harrelson's character, and then he starts to actually talk, and that's almost more off-putting, where he's like,
That's right.
keep that to yourself. I'm wrong. Don't talk. I don't want you to talk. Stay quiet, because that stuff is just bringing me down.
Yeah, exactly. And so that dynamic is it's kind of the driving force of the show. Their dynamic, and as it relates and parallels the plot of them investigating these brutal, heinous crimes. So,
Yeah, and
so go ahead, go ahead.
no, and this show, because what I like about it is it's truly a show about good versus evil in a real way. It's I think that theme is kind of hidden and disguised a little bit, because in this case, the good, it's you have these two flawed cops, really flawed, but they're really the agents of, they're trying to hold back the tide of chaos. And you have the Yellow King, which is, he's scary because he has a rhyme and a reason to his activities. They don't make sense to you or I, but there's a methodology. He has a belief system. It's just a despicable, evil, deranged belief system. But you have these two opposing forces that are, for most of the show, they're in opposition with each other, but they don't even know really that they're fighting. Right? You have the Yellow King who's doing his thing, which is in essence chaos. He's kind of like a Joker figure, and then you have Russ Cole, who's trying to thwart him and to end him. And I find interesting is that even though Russ Cole identifies himself as a pessimist, and there's a great monologue where he's just like, consciousness was an accident, and really any conscious person, if they have the strength, should just off themselves. Even though he says something like that, he's actually the Yellow King calls him the little priest. He is the priest of the light, trying to fight the dragon that is the Yellow King. And that is a story that's old as time. And maybe that's, for me at least, why this show struck me, because it's like, ooh, that's like an ancient storyline taking place in a somewhat modern day environment.
Very well said. I think we can move on. That's a great synopsis. And so let's go on to our favorite quotes. I know you and I share this as well. I think and it'll also epitomize the show just for the audience in general. My favorite line is when McConaughey, as you said, he's kind of losing his mind, but it's a struggle for him every day. Is he losing his mind, or is he in tune with something that very few people on this planet are in tune with? And the way it's presented is they go and they're investigating a church, like a rundown, destroyed church, in the middle of, once again, it looks like it's in the middle of nowhere. It's just in a field. And they walk in, and Marty's looking around, doing like the normal detective stuff. And McConaughey, in the inner monologue, so he's in the future, he's telling the story of what you're seeing on the television. So once again, multiple timelines. I know you'll get it when you watch it. And he goes, there were days that I thought I lost it, but there were other times where I thought I was mainlining the secret truth of the universe. You kind of see what the character of Rust is. That's what he's dealing with. He's dealing with, is he actually insane, or is he so sane that he's seeing and feeling and experiencing things the life force of the universe that very few people get to do. It's very interesting.
Damn, that is.
Yeah.
Oh, I like the way you said it. I don't think you've ever said it that way before. But you're right. Like and visually, if you watch it, they visually kind of show that
Hmm.
as well, because it's like, yeah, he's seeing things.
Yeah, those birds. He thinks he sees that flock of birds,
Yeah,
and
it's like
it's
hallucinations,
a
but he's like,
hallucination. Yeah.
yeah, he's like, am I seeing this? Am I going in? And it's like, yeah, it's that, and you kind of see it played out in other films and TV shows, but it's like, yeah, here you have a person who's he can't tell. He's constantly having to figure out, am I losing my mind or am I tapping into something? And I think this is something we can talk about another day, but that's kind of an interesting thing, because I think there is actually a deep truth to that, because the people who tend to be quote unquote enlightened or wise or whatever, they tend to be perceived as a little bit mad, a little bit insane.
Yes.
And it's not that they're insane or they're mad, but it's like they're just humming, they're vibrating, and they're seeing things, and they're making connections that just don't make sense to you. So when they say stuff, it's not gonna make sense. It's not them. It's actually you. You just It's like an ant and a human trying to have a conversation. It's not gonna make sense to each other.
Yeah. So yeah. So it also that ties in to my favorite monologue in the show, where he's being interrogated by these two young police officers who are trying to figure out what they did 15 years prior, what actually happened. And he goes on this really about a 5 minute long monologue. Again, once again, goes without saying, very well acted. Just his mannerisms and his facial expressions and his delivery. It's why he won the award. It's why he won the Golden Globe for this. It's award worthy performance, just that scene alone. And he's talking about how human life, most people's lives, are just a dream that they're having inside of a locked room. Your life is not your life. It's just a dream you're having. And his evidence of this is when he's looking at the photos of all these poor dead girls, they've just been mutilated and just it's brutalized. It's terrible. And
Yeah.
he's looking at dozens of photos of this, and he said at the last moment you could see it inside their eyes. They welcomed it. They had enough of what they were going to, but there was a realization. It was almost euphoric that you didn't have to grip life so tightly, because when you pass on, it's not the end. That there's no finality in death. All you do is you spiritually and energetically transcend into the universe, and you become part of the organism. So it's almost an awakening that you have at that last split second. You realize, why was I holding on to life so tightly when there's nothing final in what's about to happen? It may actually be better than what I've been experiencing. And he points that out. But classic McConaughey, and great writing as well. He goes, but like a lot of dreams, there's a monster at the end of it. And then they cut to a scene where you see Reggie Ledoux. He's dressed in just like, he has tattoos everywhere. He's dressed in just tidy whities. He has a machete and he has a giant gas mask on. And they just freeze frame it there. And the best part about that is that scene was the last scene for about 2 weeks, because the motherfucking Super Bowl was the next week, and they didn't put True Detective on because the goddamn Super Bowl was that next week, and they didn't want to compete with that. So I had to wait 2 weeks with everyone to see who the hell that was and who was the monster at the end of the dream.
Yeah, that's crazy. I remember that. Oh,
Yeah, it's spine chilling, spine
yeah.
tingling, spine
Yeah,
tingling.
actually both. I
Bone
mean,
chilling. But yeah, it works. It works.
I think, yeah, one of my favorite quotes is towards the end, or is the end. I think it's the last scene, and right, you get one perspective of Russ Cole. Right, he is kind of the pessimist, the one who thinks consciousness is a mistake. But by the end, what I liked is you saw a transformation take place as he battles the Yellow King, and I don't care. I'm going to tell you, is victorious. There's a scene where he's being pushed in a wheelchair by Woody Harrelson's character, and they're looking
Marty.
up at the Marty. So it's Russ is being pushed by Marty
Yes.
outside, right? And it's a night sky, and there's some stars twinkling, and they're looking up at the sky, and it's interesting because a change is taking place where now Marty has kind of lost his conviction, right? He's seen some darkness, and now he's questioning everything. And then you have Russ Cole, and they're looking up at the night sky, and they have this exchange. And I think Rob probably remembers the dialogue exactly. Do you remember it?
Kind of. I'll try. So off the dome, I believe uh, they both are gazing up at the stars, and Marty goes, "Man, it looks like there's a lot." Even though they, as you said, they emerge victorious. He said, "Man, there's a lot of darkness. I think it's the light's getting swallowed up. Don't think we have a chance here." And Marty, excuse me, Russ turns to him and he goes, "Nah, it's looks to me like the light's winning."
Yeah, and you see that he's transformed. He's hopeful now, whereas really this whole story, he has been the exact opposite. And for me, I think that was just from a writing standpoint, such a beautiful, well crafted ending because you see this person over 8 hours and within the course of the story, many years, because there's two timelines, transform through and have a kind of an awakening. And he shed. It seems like he shed a lot of the darkness that has clung to his soul due to the death of his daughter and these other demons he's been fighting. And to me, that scene and that dialogue was just so perfect for a way to cap off and end what was, in my opinion, some of the best TV I think I've ever watched.
Yeah, and do you remember actually watching the season finale? Remember when HBO, the Go, and all the streaming services crashed? If you didn't actually have digital plugged-in cable to your television, you couldn't watch the True Detective finale for about 2 hours because everyone was trying to stream it. The effect, it swept the nation. It swept it.
Yeah, and which is so crazy because as far as the subject matter, it's a dark subject. It's a heavy, and we can talk about this another day. But just these themes. What's scary, and I think was also captivating, is that it's not that unrealistic, and
Not at all.
that's the scary thing. Exactly, it's like the plot is not that far fetched. You might want to believe it is, and honestly, I say, you know what? But keep believing it isn't because ignorance is bliss. But the reality is there is some freaking darkness in the world, and there's some people that have aligned themselves with some, I don't know, call it either evil spirits, dark beliefs, or whatever that are just they're evil. I mean, call a spade a spade, and that's why I think this plot kind of got under people's skin and transfixed them because they're like, "Ooh, there's some truth here." Um, Maybe not even consciously they're aware of it, but they felt it. They're like, "Ooh, there's something here. This is it. This is the battle between good and evil that might actually be taking place every day in this world that we actually live in." So,
Yeah,
Rob, do you have any?
It's happening right next to us right now as we speak. I'm sorry, wherever you're listening to this, it's happening around you, and it sucks to say that. It's
Yeah,
pisses me off. It's really really disheartening and disturbing, but it's happening. And I think like you said, that's why it struck people so much because there's a small part of us that know that this is real and it's happening all around us.
yeah. There's a great line in another movie or another program, Unusual Suspects. Do you ever see that movie?
Yes, I have.
Yes, you have, of course. Where I forget the character, but he says, the greatest thing the devil ever did was what convinced people that he didn't live, or he wasn't convinced people he didn't exist, something along those lines. And that's kind of true. It's like that's people don't want to believe that some darkness is around and existing, and like you said, it's probably happening closer to home than you realize.
Yep,
And this kind of show, in a way, even though it's fiction, it kind of sheds a light on, I don't know, the dark arts.
that's right. And
Ye-
it's a topic that people don't really want to admit that they like watching, but there's a small portion of us that love that feeling of being disturbed and frightened and unsettled. Whereas not so much in real life, but in entertainment wise, we love that feeling of an uneasiness. We actually enjoy it in our entertainment. So anyone who says that they're disturbed by it, I believe them, but don't tell me you're not curious. You wouldn't sit down and watch this. You will enjoy it. It will give you that sensation that a lot of people crave.
Yeah, it'll be satisfying. Rob, do you have any takeaways? Any final thoughts?
I do, and it's probably the thing that struck me the most about this show was how it captivated everyone, and even despite the heavy nature of the subject matter. Remember when we used to go to work, when we worked at the same place, and I remember just the way my schedule worked out, I would close every Monday, and obviously the show aired Sunday nights on HBO, and I would come in and every Monday, and everyone, no matter their background, where they grew up, who they were, what their interests were, everyone was watching True Detective, and everyone was doing their fan fiction, their theories, their prognostications, their forecasting. What do you think is going to happen here? What if this happened? This is what I think. All our theories and about it. That was actually maybe my favorite part of it, because we all felt like we were, for 3 months, and maybe less. There's only 8 episodes, 2 months. We were a part of something. It was a movement almost, and it was that's all we did. I would come into work and I would talk about that, and every second of my downtime would be conversations about True Detective. So my takeaway is that should show everyone how profound and impactful. It's really a groundbreaking show. It's up there with Breaking Bad, Sopranos, Twin Peaks, X-Files, all these great dramatic, legendary, classic dramatic series, because it changed television forever. Television is no longer the same since True Detective aired, and the impact that it has is everywhere. You see it all over the place, from the title sequence to the cinematography to the scoring to the act, all of it. Right? So if that's not enough to get you to watch it, you can go fuck yourself. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, actually. I take back my apology. I'm not sorry. And my last nugget is, when you're watching True Detective, put your goddamn phone down. It's not a show that you can watch when you're texting someone, or you try to post something, where you're reading something on your phone or your computer. You gotta shut everything off. You need to dedicate 50 full minutes of attention. And unfortunately, that's a tall order. That's a large ask for a lot of the people that watch TV now. They want to watch their reality, which is not really reality. That's scripted bullshit. It's all bullshit. But they'd rather watch that than True Detective, because they can't stand of being away from their phones for 50 minutes. I shut my phone off. My phone was turned off, and I was locked in.
Wow, there you go. Enough said. Dude, thanks for talking about this. This was fun.
This was good. Yeah, it's the pinnacle of dramatic television. My final note is, you can get just as good as True Detective. You ain't gonna get better. It's the top. It's the top of the mountain. It's the summit.
Boom. Enough said. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great night. That was another episode of The Crow's Nest. We'll be back with another episode very soon. But in the meantime, if you feel a desire, a burning itch to help us make this production even better for the ears, better for the eyes, better for the soul, then pop on over to our Patreon account, where you have the opportunity to give us those nickels, those dimes, those pennies, or those dollars. Honestly, whatever amount, it does help. And the hope is that this production will get better and better. And yeah. So everyone out there listening, have a great night. Bye.